Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashida, and I will be a conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the programs and services available through Community Medicaid conference call. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during the time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. Ms. Kate Anastasia, Program Director with Alzheimer's Association Long Island Chapter. You may begin your conference, ma'am.
Thank you, Rashida, and good afternoon to all joining us today. Welcome to the Alzheimer's Association's Lunch and Learn call-in session, programs and services available through Community Medicaid. Today's topic is important for all families affected by Alzheimer's disease and is part of the association's legal and financial planning program. The Long Island chapter will be offering a free half-day conference on legal and financial planning on Saturday, March 12th at the Plainview Holiday Inn from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Free respite care is limited, so please call soon to secure a spot at our helpline, 1-800-272-3900. It is a pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Jeanette Graby. She practices in the areas of elder law and estate planning with a strong concentration in Medicaid eligibility, asset protection, and trusts and estates. Ms. Graby is a member of the Executive Committee of the Elder Law Section of the New York State Bar Association, chair of the Housing and Real Estate Committee, and is a director of the board of the Suffolk Academy of Law. She is a past president of the Estate Planning Council of Suffolk County, former co-chair of the Elder Law Committee of the Suffolk County Bar Association, and former co-chair of the Trusts and Estates and Elder Law Committee of the Suffolk County Women's Bar Association. She is also a member of the Long Island Chapter's Legal Committee. Please join me in welcoming Jeanette Graby.
Hello, Kate, and thank you for sponsoring this call. Today I'll be discussing what home care Medicaid services are available for those who qualify. Medicaid will provide personal care services for individuals who require help with any of the following: with bathing and showering, assistance with dressing and grooming, including helping people brush their teeth, take care of their nails, assisting them with toileting needs, whether it's direction to basically go to the toilet, basically to find the bathroom, assistance in dressing and cleaning up afterwards, assistance with walking, with ambulating, with being able to transfer from a chair to a bed, assistance with moving durable medical equipment. They can't administer the equipment, they can't connect the equipment with the person, but they can move the equipment. And within the home, they're able to prepare meals, help a patient eat, follow dietary restrictions, prepare the food to meet the dietary restrictions. Essentially, their home care Medicaid will provide an aid to help an individual with any of their activities of daily living with which they need assistance and keep a person home in the community for a very long time. Often home care services are able to keep the patient out of a nursing home permanently. It's a very useful Medicaid program, and in order to qualify, one has to show that they medically need this help or that they need help with these services, in conjunction to doing these tasks. For example, if a person is able to feed themselves but has dementia and the person needs direction in terms of knowing when to eat. This is lunchtime. Put the food on the table, but they're still able to feed themselves. That's considered needing assistance with eating, even though they're able to feed themselves. If a person is able to walk themselves, but needs direction to find the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room, the bedroom, that's needing assistance with ambulating, needing the direction to ambulate. If someone can walk but isn't able to transfer from a chair, being able to get up from a chair, has hip issues, has leg issues, can still walk but needs that assistance with transferring from one place to another, the aide can provide that care. So And a person declines, whether they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's or not specifically Alzheimer's, dementia, or physical ailments, and needs these cares, as long as the person qualifies financially for Medicaid, these services not only can but must be provided through Medicaid. The number of hours that Medicaid will provide has to do with the amount of care the person needs. There was a time, and sometimes a Medicaid assessor will still turn to this rule, that the amount of time of actual care was tallied up, and that's the amount of hours that were given. So if a person just needs help getting dressed and preparing meals, that might only add up to 2 or 3 hours. However, that's really not the limitation. If a person needs help with unscheduled needs, going to the bathroom is a key one, then Medicaid has to provide an aid, generally a live-in, because the need to go to the bathroom, the need for assistance to go to the bathroom, even though it may only take 15 minutes each time, is unscheduled, and Medicaid is required to meet the needs of the individual, and a person can qualify for a live-in aid if that's what's necessary. Very often, Medicaid will attempt to say that their family members who are present are required to assist a person if they're present. There is no requirement for individuals who live in the home or are present in the home to assist the patient with their care. They can certainly choose to, and if they volunteer to assist the person, then Medicaid hours will not be provided for that time. But Medicaid cannot require that informal support. If an individual on Medicaid is married, living with a spouse, that spouse cannot be required to assist that person with going to the bathroom or preparing that person's meals. If they choose to, again, the hours will be adjusted accordingly, but it can never be required. Therefore, the amount of time available from the aid is really as much time as the person genuinely needs. The only limitation in the amount of hours are for services that are basically considered level 1 home care services, and those are things like housekeeping, dishwashing, doing laundry. Those are limited to 8 hours per week, and for an individual, that's generally more than enough. If a couple is in the home and needs care independently, not independent care, but each one needs care of extensive care of their own, those hours will be doubled. The aid time is increased by the number of patients that are in the house, and again, according to each of their needs. So the Medicaid home care program is extensive. The one issue with Medicaid home care is the traditional Medicaid home care is that there are certain tasks that an aide is not legally allowed to perform, a Medicaid aide through the traditional program. And those tasks would be actually administering medication, giving insulin injections, for example, or actually putting a pill in a person's mouth and helping the person swallow a pill, or administering liquid medicine. The aide cannot administer medication. The aide can have medication, basically remind the person it's time to take your medication. Here's the pill box. Take the pills that are in the box, in the section labeled Monday. They can point them, remind them, but they can't actually administer the medication. The aide is not allowed to drive a person, so the aide can't provide the transportation. Medicaid does provide transportation through Medicaid cab companies, ambulance services. That's provided, and the aide may go along to doctor's appointments, but the aide cannot do the driving. So in situations where medication must be administered, and in situations where you need the aide to drive a patient, for those situations, there's another program available. The program's a little more complicated, but it works very well for the right people. This is called the CDPAP program. It's the Consumer Directed Personal Aid Program. And in that program, the Medicaid recipient or a family member, a responsible family member, actually hires the aide, selects the aide, chooses who they want to be the aide. that hired aide may even be a child who doesn't primarily reside in the applicant's home, or it can be a friend. Very often people find aides through local community groups or through their church, and you hire someone you know, or you can advertise and choose a person you know, and the only legal requirement is that the person be allowed to legally work in the United States. And beyond that, it is up to the Medicaid recipient or the family member to train the person to determine what this person will be responsible for, including training them to do things like insulin injections or allowing them to drive the patient. The responsible family member or the person themselves, if they have the mental capacity to do so, will be responsible for having timesheets that the aide signs submitted to Medicaid. Medicaid then will pay that person. So Medicaid handles the payment. Medicaid handles the hiring in terms of basically tax reporting, tax requirements, hiring requirements from the financial point of view, but the patient or the family member supervises the person and sets up the tasks that the person must do. Medicaid will still be the agency that determines the number of hours that is to be provided. So that's what's available for specifically home care. But within the home care program, there are other types of home care available, considered home care. One is a medical model daycare program. There are many medical model daycare programs on Long Island, and they basically are pretty much a nursing home for the day. The patient is picked up in the morning, generally about 8 o'clock. The program ends at 4 till the person comes home, is usually 4:30, 5 o'clock, depending on location. And in these programs, medical care is provided during the day, medication can be administered, there are physical therapy programs, occupational therapy programs, there are social activities. The programs generally will model a plan specifically to a person's needs, whether they be emotional needs, physical needs, medical needs, psychiatric needs, and they're wonderful programs. And through the home care Medicaid program, Medicaid will pay for a person to attend these programs. And privately paid, these programs are quite expensive. They're approximately between $150 and $200 a day. So it's a really very valuable service provided by Medicaid, and for the right fit, for the person who has the right fit for such a program, they really are very wonderful, and Medicaid will pay for this. Medicaid will also pay for social model daycare programs. If a social model daycare program is generally a wonderful program specifically for people whose primary diagnoses are dementia or Alzheimer's. It's not so much for people who have physical medical needs. The medical model program is for that. But for people with memory issues, the social model daycare programs are excellent. Medicaid will pay for these programs. However, a person must also qualify for additional care. Medicaid will not solely pay for social model daycare if a person doesn't need other care. So generally, for those who need social model daycare, the program is combined with a couple of hours of home care, maybe helping a person get ready in the morning to go to the social model program. When the person gets in the evening, or have somebody come over to do a meal in the evening, get a person ready for bed. Maybe it's for an individual who might be living with somebody else, and the night care is provided for, but they need some additional help during the day. So social model setup is done in conjunction generally with home care and the social model program. Medicaid also provides care management, a social worker to coordinate the person's needs. So if there isn't a family member already doing this, the social worker will take over that requirement of basically coordinating what programs are available. However, if a person is on community Medicaid, there must always be one responsible party if the Medicaid recipient himself or herself does not have the mental capacity to be responsible. So for those suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia, generally one family member has to basically say, I will be the responsible party. And that responsible party essentially has to take over care or make sure that care is covered in the event that Medicaid services are not available at a specific time. There is a snowstorm. The aide cannot come. The aide works 10 hours a day. The aide cannot be there for the snowstorm. That responsible person has to make sure that someone is there to take care of his or her mother, for example, and that it doesn't mean that the individual has to be there himself or herself, but take responsibility to get somebody there, even if it means hiring a private paid aide, even if it means basically they have to make sure the mom's safe, because Medicaid won't take responsibility for the case unless they know someone is going to be backup. They don't want the liability, understandably, if something were to happen, because there are issues. Things do happen. This past week's snowstorm is an example of where aides would have trouble getting in. Another thing that Medicaid will provide is that if there's no live-in aid, Medicaid will pay for a personal emergency response system. When a person qualifies for Medicaid, they could still use their own doctors. In terms of the medical care, Medicaid is the payer of last resort. That means Medicare coverage or a combined Medicare plan would be covering medical care first. Secondary would be any secondary insurance that a person has, including long-term care insurance. And when all of that has been used for particular care, then Medicaid pays. Except for long-term care insurance, most insurances do not pay for home care. Medicare will pay for a brief amount of home care, generally not more than 20 hours per week for a relatively short period of time after a hospitalization. But that's the extent of most insurance coverage. It's extremely limited. Qualifying for Medicaid. The person, first of all, has to show the medical requirement. They have to show the need for these levels of care. The only need that everything I stated that is available, a need for any of those services, with the exception of social model daycare only, will qualify for a person for Medicaid medically. And it really comes down to the activities of daily living and the supportive activities that go with these activities of daily living. The activities of daily living, as many of you may already know, are eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, ambulating, which is walking, transferring, for example, from a chair to a bed, and anything to do with continence if a person needs adult diapers. The supportive activities would be preparing the meals, shopping for the meals, directing a person, laying out the clothes for a person to dress themselves if they can. So the person who requires that laying out the clothes, and this is the way to put your pants on, the zipper goes in front, that type of thing, that supportive activity is part of the activities of daily living. So anyone who qualifies based on these needs will medically qualify. Financial qualification. Medicaid looks at money as assets in two parts. One are your assets and one is your income. The assets in the individual's name cannot exceed $14,850 for an individual who needs Medicaid or $21,750 for a couple who needs Medicaid. In addition to that money in savings, checking, value of life insurance, all of that combined, the person may own their home. We generally don't recommend that the house be in the person's name because Medicaid does have recovery options after the person passes away to recover for what they've paid. So we generally recommend that the house not remain in the person's name alone. And the person may have a car. Any personal possessions do not count towards the assets you're allowed to have. And the other thing that does not count towards the assets you're allowed to have are retirement accounts. The gross value of your retirement account, no matter how large, does not count towards that $14,850 requirement for an individual. It doesn't count as long as the retirement accounts are in monthly payout status, which is roughly the equivalent of the required minimum distributions required by the IRS. However, a Medicaid chart is used, and that number is higher than the IRS amounts, which brings us to the second financial requirement, which is income. Currently, the person may retain monthly income in the amount of $845 a month. That's money that the person can keep in their own account and spend as they wish. income includes Social Security, pensions, dividend income, interest income that a person may receive, essentially any income, including the monthly distributions from retirement accounts. Now, according to the strict Medicaid guidelines, everything over $845, if Medicaid were to have their way, would be paid to Medicaid in order to qualify for home care services. However, that's not what's done, and that's not what needs to be done. The excess income can be put into a special type of account. It's called a pooled income trust account, but the fact that there's an underlying trust for this is almost irrelevant. For the purposes of the Medicaid applicant and family members working with the Medicaid applicant, it's enough to know that the excess money above $845 goes into the special account. And this account is used to pay the Medicaid recipient's bills, everything other than medical bills. If a person has $1,845 a month in income, they keep $845 in their own name. The extra $1,000 goes into the special account, and essentially the utility bill, the electric bill, the phone bill, the cable bill, bills that are in the Medicaid recipient's name are sent to the company that manages these accounts, and that money is used to pay these monthly bills. So it's an extra step in getting the bills paid, but the money is used for the Medicaid recipient. And the money can accumulate. It can be accumulated to pay the tax bill at the end, the property tax bill at the end of the year. One thing, there is a monthly charge, and it's generally a sliding scale depending on how much money is put into the account monthly. And it's a relatively modest charge. But if there's any money left in the account when the person passes away, the remaining money is paid to Medicaid. So generally, it's not a good idea to turn this into a savings account unless a person is relatively young and is expected to be on Medicaid a long time. But to have this money spent monthly, and it's well worth the initial inconvenience because it does become simple once used to managing it, to have Medicaid services. And the $845 in cash that a person keeps a month is usually adequate to pay the ordinary bills. And they will pay the Medicaid recipient's credit card bills if the receipts showing what the expenses were for are provided. So if groceries are put on a credit card bill, you provide the grocery slip with the credit card bill, and that bill can be paid through the pooled income trust account. That essentially becomes the financial requirements. One thing that many people are aware of is that there's a 5-year look back for Medicaid. That is only true for nursing home Medicaid. For home care Medicaid, including Medicaid paid for assisted living, but there are only 3 or 4 assisted living facilities that accept home care Medicaid. Most are private paid, so Medicaid does not pay for private assisted living facilities. But for all of these other programs, home care, the Medicaid paid assisted livings, there is no 5-year look-back period. There is only a 1-month look-back period. What this means is that if a person has excess resources, and an individual can have resources of $14,850, again, retirement accounts won't count, those excess resources can be transferred prior to requiring Medicaid, generally into an irrevocable trust, which is the best way to protect the assets and still qualify for Medicaid. And the individual can qualify for Medicaid even if they own a home, and the home will still be protected from Medicaid recovery. And even if they have excess money, if a person has $100,000, wants to basically preserve the money for their life and preserve the inheritance for their children, that money can be put into an irrevocable trust, a special kind of Medicaid-qualified irrevocable trust, and the money can be protected. The person can qualify for home care Medicaid. If a person does transfer assets to qualify for community Medicaid, it's extremely important to keep in mind the 5-year look back for nursing home Medicaid. In the event that the person has no choice and does need a nursing home within the 5-year period. So although it's simple to qualify financially in terms of resources and moving resources for home care Medicaid, it's very important that that 5-year look back be incorporated into any plan. And an experienced elder law attorney is a person to talk to about this, because transfers were being done to qualify for home care Medicaid, you want to make sure that nothing impedes the person from qualifying for nursing home Medicaid down the road. It has to be done very carefully, very correctly, because that 5-year look back for for nursing home Medicaid, is there's a very detailed, difficult examination process done of finances, and it's extremely important that everything be done very correctly so as not to cause a problem in the future. Therefore, one shouldn't move assets without very specific instructions from someone who understands this area of law. There are other levels of requirements in terms of getting the assessments done for Medicaid. So once a person qualifies financially, has the medical need, Medicaid is actually provided through something called a managed long-term care company, and as a result, in order to qualify after one qualifies financially through the Department of Social Services, a person has to then have two assessments done, one through a company that's directly contracted with Medicaid, and a second one to the managed long-term care company, which also contracts with Medicaid, but the managed long-term care company is the one that actually supervises the services. So there are two home care assessments that have to be done, and that's part of the process. First, financial, the two assessments have to meet the requirements I discussed earlier, and then an aid can be put into the home the first of the following month after the assessments. That pretty much describes what a person has to do to qualify and what services are available. At this time, I'd like to open up the lines for questions. If anyone has any questions, please follow the instructions to ask the questions.
Okay, at this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. Again, if you would like to ask a question, press star 1 on your telephone keypad. There are no questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. Excuse me. Thank you, Rashida. And please keep in mind that we will be hosting the Legal and Financial Planning program on Saturday, March 12th, and you can call the helpline 1-800-272-3900 for additional information or to register. And again, I'd like to thank Jeanette Graby for such valuable and important information. This program will be made available online, and you'll be able to find it on our website, www.alz.org/Long Island. Give us probably a week or two in order to get the recording up and posted. Thank you.
Thank you.
This concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect.